Hey folks, this is Chris Crazy House here, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the news I've been seeing recently because of a lot of comic book stores are announcing that they are closing, and the comics industry itself has not been doing very well in helping to keep these places open. And it's a shame, a real shame. I mean, when I was growing up, going to the comic book store was everything to me. And the fact, because when I first started collecting comics, I used to get them just from like either the grocery store or Kmart or the like local 7-Eleven. That's when they used to still have comic books on the rack. But I finally discovered that there were actual comic book stores, and that was like one of the happiest things in my life. The first time I walked into, I believe the comic store was called Comics Plus in Neptune, New Jersey, for anyone who lived in that area. But I remember when the first time I walked in there, it was like the happiest experience of my life. And my stepdad used to take me and my little brother there, and we were allowed to each get, I can't remember, I think it was either 4 or 5 comics at a time, that each, and that was it. I mean, that's when comics were still fairly cheap. They were between 75 cents to $1, and it might cost a little bit more if it was like an annual or something like a large size issue. But they were fairly affordable at that time, so it wasn't that big of a deal to get each of us 5 comics, and whatever we wanted we could get. So I mean, just seeing comic book shops back then, there was one in Long Branch, New Jersey, a very small one next to like this bank. And what other, then when I was in high school, Kevin Smith, the director Kevin Smith of Clerks, he opened up one right around the corner from my high school. I remember I used to try to leave school as early as possible to just go in there and get some comics before, and then like run and catch my school bus. That was like my thing. Like I used to have any books that I needed to take home for homework and have my coat ready during the last period, and then I would literally just run the hell up out of there and go to the comic book store, and then come back and like catch my bus. Sometimes I would just stay after school and just go ahead and take the city bus home, but you know, I did whatever I could to go in there and get some comics. That was my thing, and I have so many great memories of going into comic book stores and getting so many of the classic issues that we all talk about now. I remember going there and getting X Force #1 that Rob Liefeld did. I remember when Image started and getting Spawn #1. And the first time I bought Eric Larson's Savage Dragon #1, I remember buying that there. I remember when Jim Lee redid the X-Men. We did X-Men #1, and they had those four different covers that could go together and make one large poster. I remember that. That was one of the, like I said, that was a crazy day. There was a lot of people in the store that day. I remember that. So like those were the days, man. Those really were. But now a lot of that is falling apart because of mismanagement of the, not the comic book store owners themselves, but the mismanagement of the industry. You would think the fact that so many of these characters are being made into films and into movies, the comic book industry should be flourishing, but it's not. It's actually dwindling. And part of the reason is because you have so much. I almost can't even call it politics, because I don't know what these people's agendas are. They do have an agenda, but mostly it's a self-serving, selfish agenda. A lot of people get into comics now just so they can have a springboard so they can go write for Hollywood, or they think they're going to work on some comic book that they can sell to Hollywood and get a TV show made. Like doing comics has become a stepping stone to get into Hollywood, or do a TV show or whatever. And I think that's a shame. Like it's become a lost. There are not that many people who get into it for the medium itself. It's always some sort of self-serving thing where they just want to jump to another thing. And someone argued that, that era that I came from, the early '90s era with Image Comics and what they were doing at Marvel, that was the start of it. But I don't think. I mean, those guys were taking back control of their creator-owned property. It was a little different back then. because they were trying to go against the whole idea of just working for years and years on other people's characters and not getting paid for it. That was more revolutionary than what's going on now. It seems like everyone's trying to meld more back into the corporate mindset and letting these companies just control everything. Like I knew it was going to be bad when Disney took over Marvel and they were suing and sending artists cease and desist letters for doing fan art at conventions. And I'm not talking about your average, everyday, just regular artist or whatever doing fan art. I'm talking about the people who created those characters. I remember very specifically Disney was sending cease and desist letters and trying to sue the man who created Ghost Rider. But because he created Ghost Rider under work for hire, they said that's not your character and you can't sell original pages or whatever. So pretty much just cut that man off at the knees of his livelihood just so they can keep a penny, so they can pinch a penny. That's pretty much all they're doing. Just like it just shows that they really did not understand the community itself. And I knew right then with that type of corporate involvement, things were going to implode. And then you have all these ridiculous storylines and trying to introduce these new characters, and it's gotten really bad now. I just talked about the new Warriors last week, or the new woke Warriors as I call them. And they just announced this, was it X-Men Children of the Atom? We have all these X-Men sidekicks, and they all just look like gender-bent versions of original X-Men characters, or racially bent versions of these X-Men characters. And like the two people that they have working on it or who are doing the trailer, like they just sound like they have no idea what they're talking about. They seem like they have no idea. Like it almost seems like they never read comics before. Like some of the things they were saying was like they make it seem like everything they were doing was new. So like, oh, we have young people as mutants and how great they are. It's like that story's been done before. Grant Morrison did that story where mutants were becoming popular in pop culture. As far as Young Mutants go, that goes all the way back to not even just New Mutants and X-Force, but the original X-Men were young people. They were young, hip people when they first started. I'm talking about the original team, Cyclops, Beast, Iceman, Angel, and Marvel Girl. Those were young people. I mean, and then they introduced characters later on, like Kitty Pryde, who was like 14, I think, at the time when she was first introduced. So it's like, this is not anything new that they're doing. And the stories that they're doing is not any... It seemed like they're more obsessed with talking about how these mutants have their own internet presence and less worried about talking about writing a good, exciting story that people would appreciate. Long gone are the days of Stan Lee, Jack Kirby. Long gone are the days of Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, and Jim Lee, and great writers like Chris Claremont and John Byrne, Peter David. Those days are gone. There's no one who's trying to write an interesting, awesome adventure story that you can just sink yourself into for a few minutes while you're reading a comic book. There's a time where I would just kind of lay my comic books out and just sit there and look through them and just enjoy them. Going to the comic book shop was a fun experience, but these places can't afford to stay open with the whack content that's been coming through there. I mean, they kind of had a resurgence with, stocking up anime and stuff like that, but I don't even know if that's going to help them now. Because at the comic book shop that's close to me, like they've been selling for the whole year. I thought this was just going to be like a 1 month promotion, but for the whole year they were selling all their graphic novels at half off. Now that was somewhat fun for me. I bought a whole bunch of stuff there over the last year and stocked up my bookshelf pretty big, but even so, that's not something that I would think could help sustain it. It's almost like they're just trying to get rid of the product. And like I said, it's almost like I can't blame them. I understand, like you get into this thing for the love, but it seems like the industry that you're beholden to does not love you or does not love the products that they're selling. You can tell that the people at Marvel don't really have any love for the characters of what they're putting out there. They're just trying to put out whatever they think is quote unquote popular. They're trying to speak to this audience that doesn't really even exist. The non-binary kids aren't running to read comic books. I mean, seriously, you don't have to do that to them. You don't have to cater to them, or how do I want to say it? You don't have to condescend to people like that. Just write a good story, and they'll come read it. Okay, you don't have to do that. Hell, if I'm a black person and I've been reading comic books where there's mostly white heroes all these years, just write a cool story. I'll come read it. You don't have to condescend to me and make what's her name, Riri Williams or whatever, or even Miles Morales. I guess those characters are cool, but like I said, it was nothing that I was obsessed over that I needed to see. I just wanted to read a cool story, a cool action adventure story, you know. But like I said, it's just it's real sad to see. And then with this whole thing going on with the social distancing and lockdown, a lot of those stores have to close, and they just announced, like I said, they're going to stay closed. They just can't afford to open back up whenever this passes over. I mean, it was already bad before, but now when people are being told not to go out, and a comic book store is not considered an essential place that people need to go to, they're not buying medication there, then that's just going to be it for them. And like I said, it's a sad thing. I used to love going to the comic book store. I'm hoping the one that's close to me stays open. I mean, there's a lot of local artists that still sell their stuff there, and they sell a lot of toys as well. But I'm not sure if that's going to keep them open. I don't know what's going to happen. I'll find out soon, I guess, when I try to go there in May, if they're going to stay open or not. But like I said, a lot of it has to do with the terrible content that the majors have been putting out, and they've been putting out absolute garbage. Get some real people who actually appreciate the medium to write for it, not people who are just trying to use it as a stepping stone to get to Hollywood. I mean, just go get your Screenwriters Guild card and go write a screenplay, or write your own comic. Do it that way, rather than trying to just squeeze your way into something that's already established. And stop with all this nonsensical nepotism and yes men and having these types of people work in comics the whole time. You know, there was a time where you could actually, a lot of people that worked in comics were actual rebels. They were not the mainstream culture. Even thinking about people like Jack Kirby. I remember reading a story about him when he worked for Will Eisner. How he backed down some guys from the mob who were trying to muscle in on some of the things that they were doing when they had like their own independent studio. There was a time where people like that were rebellious. Now it seems like everyone there is just an establishment tool. I don't know, man. It's not the culture that it was. Other people have infringed on it because it's become popular because of the movies, and it's not what we all grew up with. I don't know. Maybe I'm just nostalgic. Maybe I'm just an old curmudgeon. You folks let me know how you feel about it in the comments section. Anyway, Chris Crazy House signing out. Peace.